Good morning. What a great thing it is to serve God. Great thing to have a church like ours. I get to run around a little bit. I was just a couple of weeks ago, my wife and I were speaking in North Carolina. It was a couples retreat in Pigeon Forge, and then got to stay the weekend, preach at Brother John Shook's church, and then had a chance to be in Elgin, Illinois, right outside Chicago just recently, and got to meet Pastor Kavanaugh and the folks at Providence Baptist College, Northwest Bible Baptist Church. That's where Keith Gomez was for many years, and just great people. You know, one of the things that was asked is about the fires in California and how close were they, and you know, and I said these were tragic because a bunch of homes burned, but I said we have fires every year somewhere. We're a rolling grass hill covered place, and we have fires. And normally there's not a bunch of houses. A couple of years ago, a town in Central California burned. That was tragic, and literally the whole city burned up. And now this year, but the word burn, we talk about money burning a hole in your pocket. What do we mean? I mean, it just goes away. And you burned your bridges. You acted in a way so you lost some relationships and you cannot go back. Lost a job, you can't go back. Once you've been convicted of embezzlement, you're never working in a bank again. And somebody might let you work at a Circle K or a convenience store, but probably not even that. But to use the term burn, it's things that we would trust, things that we would rest in, hope in. And in the book of Acts, the people that got saved, they brought their books and their magical things and witchcraft type things. They brought all that and they burned those things. That's a literal fire. But it's symbolically saying, I am burning my past. I'm done with it. It's gone. I'm not trusting in those things. I'm not leaning on those things. When you get saved, it's okay to burn some bridges. It's okay to just say, I'm done. I'm done with that old life. I remember I had not been saved very long, and some friends invited me to a Christian concert. And I think I'd only been to maybe one concert ever before I was saved, like a worldly concert. And but you see things on TV and you hear about them. And so I'm in this so-called Christian concert, and I remember standing there listening to the music and the lights and the appearance of the audience, the physical response to the music. And I thought, this is no different than what I got saved out of. I didn't walk out. It wasn't a wicked, evil, kind of thing. But I knew this. I got saved out of that. And I was done with that. And I had burned those bridges. I'm not going back. I'm not going back to the world's music. I'm not going back to their sensuous, entertaining style of music. I remember many, many years ago, at least 30, maybe 40 years ago, my wife and I were in Riverside. In those days, there was nothing here. There were no stores here, hardly at all. And a little tiny town we were in. And we'd drive about an hour to Riverside or down south toward Oceanside, both places about an hour drive. No traffic in those days. And if we did any shopping, well, we were at a Christian bookstore, and they had a TV or a monitor of some kind on. They really didn't have monitors like computers. They used TVs and DVDs, and not DVDs, VHS tapes maybe. But anyway, I remember walking out of this Christian bookstore, and I always got frustrated. I quit going to Christian bookstores because there's so much non-Christian stuff. It just bothered me. And but there was a Christian lady and a singer, and it was just her on a platform holding her microphone. And I looked at it and just looked and didn't really. But anyway, pretty popular singer. If I called the name, you that are over 40 would know the gal. And then we go to a mall, and there's a music store of some kind there, and they have a TV out in front. And they had a gal named Olivia Newton-John, who's famous back then in the ladies' vocal world. And she was singing a song that she made famous called Let's Get Physical. And she's got her microphone, and I looked at it for a minute, and then I thought about that gal in the Christian bookstore, and I thought, if you had the volume down on both those, you could not tell which one was Christian. They are both sensuously dressed. They are both bodily motion sensuous. Their microphone, the lighting, the dancing across the platform, it's just the world. And see, I burned those bridges. I was going somewhere with this. I burned those bridges. When I got saved, I wanted Christ. The Bible says he put a new song in my heart, and I'm going to be in the book of Hosea in a minute. But there's some things that change. I remember being with some teenagers, and one of them was walking around with a case of beer, and I just said, no, I don't want any. And he said, they're going to get you, aren't they? And he was talking about these Christians I've been hanging around. And I said, yeah, I think they are. And I was at a party up in, after I got saved, in college in Washington, a fraternity sorority party, and they had an open bar. And I was drinking Coke or 7-Up or whatever in a glass. And I remember looking at that, and all around the room, liquor's everywhere, and me thinking, nobody knows what's in this glass but the bartender. And I put it down, and I never went back to another party like that. There's multiple times I could bring up when I just said, I'm done. I am done with this. Now, that kind of bridge burning, you ought to do. But on the other hand, there are times God will burn some bridges. And the things that you rely on, the things that you trust in. That's where we are in the book of Hosea. By the way, I don't know what you're thinking about all the political things going on, but I'm happy. I love seeing accountability. I love seeing people who have mocked righteousness and decency. I love seeing them get payback. I remember that kid who got in all the trouble with some Indian guy in D.C. He's a kid from a Catholic school, and all the mess. Well, he got a big old settlement from the networks that tried to destroy him. And I thought, I don't know if that money was good for the kid, but I'm glad that they burned him. In basketball or tennis, you might say a good play, you burned the person, you left them behind. And more we're seeing people who are criminal in the political world and in the media world being burned. And that's what we're looking at here. And again, I'm happy with where we are in a lot of this stuff in America. But in Hosea 8:14, it says this, for Israel hath forgotten his maker and builded temples, and Judah hath multiplied fenced cities, but I will send a fire upon his cities, and it shall devour the palaces thereof. Now, what God was going to do is going to burn their fancy palaces, burn their beautiful cities. Why? Because Israel had forgotten his maker and builded their own little things. They had religion, they built their temples, but they'd forgotten God. And when men begin to push God away and to begin to put their trust in earthly things, it's a scary thing. Now, I hope you're praying for your country, because most of the people in leadership in our country, I don't know, most is probably not a good word to use, but many of the people that carry positions of influence in our country, they have no use for God. They never utter a prayer. They never read a Bible. And they may never frequent a church. I don't know. But there are a bunch of people, and we as the people of God need to cling to our Bible and cling to our churches and say, God, have mercy on our leaders. They're making decisions. And Lord, we need you. We've got to have God's help. And like with Sodom and Gomorrah, had there been 10 righteous, God wouldn't have destroyed the wicked city. So I don't know what it's going to take in America, but I'll tell you, this morning early, I was praying for our country and praying for pastors and praying for churches, and that the people of God would rise up and read his word and love him and seek a holy life. Why? Because we've got a bunch of people who are evil, in our vernacular evil. Then we got a bunch of people who may be conservative, but they're godless. They go through their day, give God no praise, no glory. They never read a Bible. They don't teach their children about heaven or hell. I mean, I don't care how rich you are. if you don't teach your children about Jesus, your children are likely to go to hell. And your money's not going to buy anybody out of hell. And so we ought to pray for our country because God burns things. You go back over to verse 4. They have set up kings, but not by me. They have made princes, and I knew it not. Of their silver and their gold have they made them idols, that they may be cut off. And God comes along and says, you've set up all these rulers and leaders, and you've set up people of importance, princes and kings, but you didn't do it by me. You didn't seek my guidance. You didn't seek my direction. And he said, all the idols of gold and silver you made, they're all going to perish. They're going to burn. Over in verse 12, same chapter, I've written to him the great things of my law, the wonderful things in this book, but they were counted as a strange thing. He says, you know what? I gave my book to these people, and they said, well, that's strange. That's weird. Nobody can understand that old King James Bible. And I mean, the Bible is a bunch of fairy tales, and we believe in science, and they count religion in the Bible a shredded thing. The rich and the politically powerful and the people who push God away, I can tell you, God's going to burn their world. And God is going to begin in mercy, if he would, and if he'd have mercy on them, he'd burn their world and help them come to themselves and realize, I have nothing without God. I don't know if President Trump got there through the various things he faced from being shot and other things. He may have, he certainly had a little spiritual inkling going on. I don't know how much, but we have some people of influence that it would be mercy for God to literally rip away everything they trust in and give them a chance to turn to him. The sad thing is a lot of people, it's going to be ripped away and they won't have a chance to turn to God. And here we look at there at verse 12. I've written these great things, but they were counted a strange thing. And then you go down in the end of verse 14 where we read earlier, that I will send a fire upon his cities, and it shall devour the palaces thereof. I wonder how many people drove through Pacific Palisades, through Malibu. That's a beautiful area. As a boy, we swam along Malibu Beach often, and those beaches and the houses up in the hills, beautiful homes, and all these houses, some right on there's the water, a beach, and then often a string of houses, and then the Pacific Coast Highway, and then more houses, and they work their way up hills and things. But these last fires burned right down to the water. Such a tragedy in our eyes. I know God does what he wants to do, but I think you can't get trusting in your riches. It'll burn up like that. And we can't get trusting in our it's like the guy in Jesus' parable. He said he didn't have room for all of the grain and all of the harvest and all of the wealth that he'd acquired. He said, I know what I'll do. I'm going to build bigger barns and bigger silos. I'm going to have a bigger house. And God said, thou fool, this night thy soul shall be required of thee. Then who shall these things be? And I can tell you, in America, these days, the way people have lived, especially in the last few years, how filthy, how bringing perversion into little children's classes and bringing perversion into locker rooms and bringing perversion into school rooms. Don't expect any mercy from God. Children are precious to God. And as we get older, if we choose to be bad on our own, that's bad. But when we take an innocent child who's a blank slate and we begin writing perversion on the soul of children, don't expect God to have any patience with that. And those are terrible days. And we need the mercy of God. And this crowd that sought to elevate perversion and magnify filthy living, the 20 or 50 gender world, how foul and perverse, how far from honesty. Because as soon as they start turning from God, their eyes grow dark and they don't understand. But right here in Hosea, God says, I'm going to burn it up. I'm going to burn it up. I'm going to burn these things you're trusting in. I'm going to burn up these things that are your escape route. I'm going to burn up your reserves. I'm going to burn up your savings accounts. You better keep God central. the New Testament says it's a fearful thing to fall into the hands of the living God. It ought to scare us to think of offending a holy God. And I can tell you, I feel that way. There are things creep into my thinking and stuff, and I think I can't think that way. I do not want to offend God. And I'm not talking about behavior. I'm talking about thoughts. Jesus said a lot about thoughts, and I don't want to think vengeful thoughts. I don't want to think hateful thoughts. I don't want to think, for husbands, the Bible says, husbands, love your wives and be not bitter against them. Well, bitterness is just in your heart. I can't allow bitterness. It may visit my heart, but I can't allow it to park there and build a home. This world is so vile, and we forget how holy God is. I remember when governor years ago, I believe it was Arnold Schwarzenegger, but I'm not sure, but California governor signed in the gay marriage bill, and I think it was within 24 hours or 48 hours, there were 1,000 lightning fires scattered across the state from Sacramento north. The whole northern half of the state literally erupted in flames right after he signed that. And I remember writing a note, meaning is in a spiritual sense, you signed that note and 1,000 lightning fires, maybe you better mend your ways or think through this before something worse happens. And I emailed it, whatever. And I thought, wait a minute, I hope he's not thinking I'm threatening. I hope the FBI doesn't come after me. I wasn't threatening the governor. I was warning him because of a holy God. But let me just encourage you. There is a holy God. And we ought to pray for our country. And we ought to pray for mercy on this nation. That's what Abraham did. When his nephew Lot was down there in Sodom and in that filthy, immoral, sodomite-filled place, he begged mercy. And he was called the friend of God. Nothing wrong with us praying for our country. You drive by a school, pray for mercy on that school. You go by even a place of business, pray. Go by churches, pray our churches would stand for truth and right. And we've got a society of adulterers and people with no morals. And oh, how we need to pray for mercy and seek God. And it could be that as we, of God's people, as we seek God's mercy, maybe we'd find mercy on this land in spite of the garbage that's gone on. And I do love where we are. I love seeing the things going on in America. I think we're going the right direction, but I could be wrong. It could be the Antichrist and the false prophet are in Washington, D.C. helping run things. I have no idea, but I know I'm going to love his book, and I'm going to love him because he is our one hope.